Hi guys, here's a quick tip. The H1 flight controller supports 5 flight modes, and those are GPS, ATI, 6G, manual and return to home. So from the factory we have this top switch as return to home. Then we have GPS, and then we have 3D mode. But 3D mode as a beginner is pretty useless because you're certain to crash. So I suggest you switch the 3D mode to ATI mode. And I also suggest that you switch the orientation of the switch anyway, because when the radio boots up, it wants to be all positions up. So it makes the most sense to have this already in GPS mode, this in ATI mode, and that in return to home mode. You can of course have this in return to home mode, GPS and ATI. It all depends what your preferences are. However, today we're going to talk about another mode that you can invoke by using this extra switch here, because the radio actually supports 9 flight modes, but we are not going to go that far. So we're going to assign this switch in the ATI position to flick between 3D or 6G mode, but stay in GPS mode or return to home mode wherever this switch is. So we're only going to let it change any mode in ATI mode, not in GPS or return to home. How do we do that? We unlock our radio, then we hit the mode switch section, and you'll notice that switch C, which is this one here, is currently set to GPS, ATI and return to home. Let's give this a proper name. Okay, so we have GPS, ATI and return to home. Watch the values. Right, now we're going to invoke this switch here. That's switch 2. Switch D. We're going to assign setting 2 or switch 2 to switch D, which is that. So we've switched this switch on. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that in the up position, whether this switch is up or down, this must stay in GPS mode. At the moment it doesn't. So we're going to change that now first. We're now affecting the relationship between this switch and the top position. So let's name it first. To GPS. And we're going to give this value in that position a value of 1500. So whether I'm here or here, that stays in GPS mode. Let's do the return to home as well. Return to home. Return to home. If this value is different in this position and that position, you need to assign flight mode 6 to a value of 2000. I had already pre-programmed this radio, so it's already in. If it's not, then flick your switches, name it, and set the settings. So whatever happens, this always stays. We return to a GPS and return to home. See, nothing changes. Flight mode 1 and 2 are GPS, and flight mode 5 and 6 are return to home. Now what about 3 and 4? Flight mode 3 and 4 is here. That's 4 and that's 3. So in standard mode, we've got up, GPS, ATI. I want to now make this either 6G or manual mode. So I will flick the switch to the right position, name it. In this case, I want to try 6G. And its value will be 1300. So there we go. So in other words, we switch the radio on. All positions are up. We're in a safe GPS mode. And if you flick this by mistake, flight mode 1 and flight mode 2 are set to GPS. So we're flying, happy days. We switch to ATI. Now we want to try 3D mode or 6G mode. So flight mode 3 is set to 6G. Now we're flying in 6G mode. Oh dear, I need return to home. We've set flight mode 5 to return to home, and we've set flight mode 6 to return to home. Does that make sense? So wherever this switch is, flight mode 6, or flight mode 1 and 2, they both set to GPS mode. So even if you're in GPS mode and you're flying and you flick this by mistake, you're going to stay in GPS mode. If you're in return to home and you flick this by mistake, it'll stay in return to home. The only time that this is now affected is in flight mode 3. Remember, you've got 5 flight modes. So you can have attitude mode. You can try either 6G or manual mode, and you can always flick to return to home, or you can always flick to GPS mode, because flight mode 1 and 2 are GPS, and flight mode 6 and 5 are return to home. We've only affected flight mode 4 and 3. Let's check it on the main switch, on the main page. We start the radio, we're in GPS mode. We're still in GPS mode. Then we flick to ATI mode. Now we want to try 6G or manual. We flick to 6G or manual. We're flying. Oh dear, something happened. We can just flick to GPS and we can leave this. We don't have to do that. We can just be flying in 6G mode. Oh dear, something happens. We can just flick to GPS as usual, or we can flick to return to home as usual, even though we're in our 6G mode over here. Remember that this switch is only affected in that position. It's not affected in that position or in that position. So basically flight mode 1 and 2 are GPS, and flight mode 6 and 5 are GPS. We've only changed flight mode 4 and 3. So I hope that helps, guys. Thank you.